Hi and welcome to AXSchat. We're delighted to welcome Karolyn Gehrig, who is the founder of Hospital Glam, which is a social movement based on hashtag and selfies, taking back the clinical space. I think it's a brilliant project. I absolutely fell in love with the concept when I saw the photos. Karolyn, you've recently spoken at Stanford's MedX, so welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you and what brought about this fantastic project?
Sure. Uh, so I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in 2003, and then around 2006, I got involved with the New York City EDS group, and then we changed the name to EDS NYC, and I worked with them until 2010. At which point I moved to Los Angeles. And then I've been kicking around Los Angeles for a couple of years, and I have gotten sicker in that time. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a progressive connective tissue disorder, and it's progressive because time moves forward and ravages us all in sort of, the ways it ravages even healthy people. So in the last year or so, I had gotten sicker, and I knew that I would be in doctor's offices more often than I had been in the past. And usually I go to the doctors alone. So I wanted to show that I could be in a doctor's office and kind of be there for myself and support myself there in that way, still represent myself on social media, as like having a normal life, because this is a normal life. It's just a different kind of normal. There are so many people who are sick and where this is a part of our daily lives. And I don't think it's any less valid than, I don't know, people who have children or people who have normal office jobs or anything like that, So while other people are taking selfies at Starbucks, I started taking self-portraits in the doctor's offices. Initially, I had taken some point of view shots, but then I realized that asked the viewer of these photos to look through my eyes. And when an able-bodied person looks at a hospital setting like through someone's eyes, they just think injury and they think pain and they think illness, and there's no way to normalize it for them, and there's no way for them to think like, oh, okay, well, this is a regular routine and this is just something that they are going through, and this is okay for this other person. And I wanted to force a viewpoint, and I wanted them to look at me and realize that this was a part of my life and that this is okay for me. Or, I mean, not okay, I'm still sick and I'm still dealing with stuff, but as okay as it's going to be. I also, at the same time, I'm a feminist, and I have an ongoing issue with the way women are positioned in media. And so I was looking at a lot of ads and a lot of the magazines in waiting rooms and ads on billboards, etc. And I would see these images of women with their bodies positioned in kind of like sick ways, where their shoulders were slumped forwards or they were slumped off to the sides, and they just looked sick. And I'm not talking about body frame. I'm not talking about low weights. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking purely about positioning. And I thought how strange it was that these are the same images that were being used to sell us good health and wellness, and like these ideas that like health and wellness were sexy and would bring you were equated with wealth. So I thought that by using my actual disabled body and posing it in similar ways, and in reinserting it in a clinical environment, that might be interesting. So I brought that in as well and started posting those online. And eventually, after like 8 or 9 months of those, I aggregated them onto a single website. I had been posting them on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook for in the interim period. But once I aggregated them onto a single site, I got attention immediately. And other people started to do it too, which is kind of the best part because now we can sort of go forward and be a tidal wave and change the way we view clinical space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually came across your work through someone else posting on the hashtag.
Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, and she's fantastic. I love Mortuary Report.
Yeah, she's great.
But I really, I had to dive deeper straight away. It was something that struck a chord with me. I mean, both you and Heather both have a obviously deeply artistic bent because the way that you pose the photos is very cleverly composed. They're artfully shot, but at the same time, you're inverting the normality of or sorry, inverting the or rewind, subverting the way that it would be done if it was a magazine shot, and injecting that your day-to-day normality, which I think is right. We spend a lot of time hiding people's disabilities, hiding people's illness. There are millions of people out there with hidden disabilities that are unseen, that ought not to be. And I think it's fantastic what you are doing so far. You're creating a very visible movement that's very, I feel empowering. And I think I've lost you. Who have we
Where's
lost?
Deborah? We lost
Oh, we
Deborah.
lost Deborah. Okay. Okay. So it's great. I'm really excited with what you're doing. I think that more people should be doing this. So we want to encourage people, draw attention to the movement that you're creating. But I know that you're interested in how you can create an online community, but also bring that community to bear in the real world, because that's something that I think is sometimes disconnected. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I feel like that works straight into accessibility concerns. Because I've noticed that my world became much more accessible to me when I started hanging out with people who had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or other disabilities in a concrete physical space. And that started happening back in New York. And I wasn't hanging out with them socially as often as I was in a support group capacity, but then eventually it did move to like socially hanging out with people. And now some of my best friends are other people with disabilities. Actually, that's totally inaccurate. I would say all of my closest friends are other people with disabilities, because I don't know, it's just easiest to communicate with other people who understand what I'm going through, or understand what I'm dealing with. And most of the time we don't talk about our physical issues other than as a side note, like, oh, yeah, I'm just having trouble today because of the thing. And then we talk about the other stuff, like real life stuff that everyone talks about and that everyone deals with. But it's just understood as a baseline condition. And I think once you have that understanding as a baseline condition, you can move on and grow and do all of the other things that you want to do in an easier way. And I think that that's something that most people enjoy and take for granted, and that people with disabilities don't necessarily get to enjoy and take for granted because we live in a world that's designed for able-bodied people.
What type of reaction do you get from healthcare professionals?
I'm very forceful, and I'm very aggressive, and I'm also very friendly at the same time. I never really have a problem because I state my needs. Sometimes I don't get the treatment that I need in a time frame in which I want it, um, and then I find someone else. Like I treat it kind of like dating, or I treat it kind of like anything else where it's a relationship, and I have to treat my relationship with my doctor, who's another human being, with respect, and also understand that they're a human who's trying to treat me. And sometimes we're just not going to click, and we're not going to mesh up. So if that's not working, then I try and find another care provider. But I don't run into too many problems because I go into appointments and look at what are our goals working together. What do we want to get out of each appointment? And I understand that I have a chronic condition that has a lot of other problems. So every time I go in, I'm not looking for an answer. I'm looking for how we can fix the problem that I'm in there, that I'm currently in the room for, or how we can make progress for the problem that's presenting at the moment.
So we're looking for strategies rather than, coping strategies rather than a cure, because you know that
Right.
it's not a cure. So you're wanting effective stuff to help you live your day-to-day life as best as possible, right?
I do, and um, I also I want understanding, and I want them to be on the same page, and also be interested in looking forward and at looking at whether or not different new symptoms are connected, or if they're indicative of things progressing in a way that I don't want them to be, that like progressing. Um, I yeah, it's it's just kind of like looking for anyone else who's working or who's good at something. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And also recognizing that they're human. I
And
tend to have,
fallible. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I tend to have good relationships with them. But I also understand, I understand that they're people, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I know that they, not know, but I hope that they understand that I've been doing this for a long time as well. I have had a couple of not so great experiences where I've met younger students, or fellows or new doctors who come in and um, have not, or have seen that I've had a giant history, but have not necessarily read it. And oh, I'm kicking off my blankets. Sorry, and have uh, I don't know, just haven't talked to my other doctors and are not really prepared for me. And then I only see them that one time and I'm out because I'm not going to be able to build a relationship with them. And they're looking for they're looking for simplicity. They don't really know how to deal with it. And I think if I had a more simple set of conditions, I would maybe engage with them further, but I don't, and I don't really have time to teach someone at this point.
So that type of friction that is happening is related with the fact that they are not being teach or train in order to be able to deal with that. What is missing for them to be able to somebody as young to the medical profession to be able to stop and say maybe I should behave differently.
Well, I think they're just overwhelmed at having a patient with a large set of diagnoses. And then I think maybe they go into the room with the assumption that I want everything cured or everything stopped, and they don't give me credit as a patient at all for knowing anything, really.
Which
So,
I've got friends with long-term chronic illness as well, and where they have illnesses that are quite rare, it's quite often that they're a much greater expert than the doctors that they're seeing,
Yeah.
They can't prescribe for themselves. So a lot of the time, yeah, it requires some recognition on the part of the medical professionals that you know yourself and your conditions far better, because you're the one living through it. You're the one dealing with the conditions. You understand what's happening in your own body far better.
Right. I think it's unfortunate that for some of the doctors, I think it's unfortunate that I know that and don't question that. I think for some of the younger doctors,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. But I don't know, maybe it's a learning experience, maybe not. I don't go back to them.
No, and I think everyone needs to self-advocate, self-advocate. It's
Yeah.
something that I'm passionate about, because if we don't speak up for ourselves, then people will speak on our behalf and they'll make assumptions that are incorrect. I know Deborah is trying to join us, and I think she's joined us by phone. She's having a few technical issues, might be due to the hurricane.
I
So,
think the best way for Deborah is to write the question, and then we'll ask question for her.
okay.
Can y'all hear me if
Oh,
I talk?
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right, good. So, you know, I think I applaud what you're doing. I think it's so important, and I didn't know about it, and so now that I know, I want to help. So, but I have a woman that works with me. Her name is Rosemary Musacchio, and Rosemary was born with cerebral palsy, and Rosemary cannot communicate in the traditional way, and so she has said to me that when she lies down, all she can do is blink her eyes. That's, you know, the amount of control she has over her body. But she is this brilliant, beautiful woman that she's a master's degree. She has accomplished a lot in her lifetime. But when she has had to go multiple times in the hospital, she's treated like she's a vegetable, and she's often treated that way in society too. When she's traveling with her mother, people, they don't see her, and it's almost like they're afraid of her. And so I think the work you're doing is so brilliant, because recently walking some illness path with my mother, it's amazing how they don't see her as a person, they see her as a symptom. And so, it seems like she loses all of her civil rights. We recently went into a doctor's office because she's bleeding behind her eyes, and I was just so shocked at the way they treated her and everybody around her. And I could tell they're diligent, loving, amazing people, but they don't see her as an entire person. They see the symptom, or the condition. And so gosh, the work you're doing is so important. It's just so important, because if we can see you as an individual, as a person, um, you know, I thought it was such a powerful thing that you said earlier. Your life is normal. You know, who's to say my life is more normal than your life? Your life is normal. It's your life. So I just think I don't have a question. I'm just really, really appreciative of the work you're doing, because this is what we need to really change people's perspective on what does it mean to be a human being. So I really applaud you, and I'm so glad Neil invited you to be on AXSchat. But we want to help. I know all three of us are very involved in social media, but I'm very impressed with what you're doing.
Thank you. I think doing Hospital Glam, like the actual act of it, has been extremely powerful for me from day one. I mean, from before it became a big thing online, just the act of standing in the room and taking the photographs of myself felt big. Because I use a self timer on my phone, and I set it down to repeat at 10-second intervals. And then I kind of set up the frame, kind of like the same way that I'm holding my air up here, and you can see like the boundaries here. So you can see where I can move in here. I would set up a frame similar to that, and I would know this is how much space I have, and then this is my space too. and letting the camera go and having it face outward and not being able to look into the lens and like check at what I look like during it, and just like take up the space and acknowledge like where I am in the space and the other items in the space. And it made me feel like it was mine. It also made me more aware of my body, and it made me able to think of like, okay, these are the things that I want to discuss during this appointment. And it made me feel a little bit more powerful. And then my doctor would walk in, and I would either just grab my phone and put it down, or, I mean, now I don't bother because my doctors know, so they'll either hand it to me if I'm not feeling well, or, just like laugh about it for a second, and then the appointment goes on. But then I would be ready, and I'd be ready to go and talking about it, and I'd feel like I was on their level because I'd feel like the space was mine too, and like it was my workspace because I had been working in that space for a couple of minutes. And that's a powerful thing, because those rooms are designed for they're designed for us to be in too, but we're not really in them. Like we move through them, and like we sit in a corner and we go like, okay, are we allowed to touch that? Oh, I really want to blow my nose, and there's a tissue box over there. Is it okay if I do that? And I mean, it's there to be used,
Yes.
but it's not for us. So just taking up that space on our own, it feels good. I don't know, it just makes a really big difference.
Yeah. So it's a powerful act of claiming that space. I think it's really obviously important. How do you translate that and translate the stuff that you've done and the movement that has grown around Hospital Glam? Because there's a lot of people posting now, and even some guys as well. There's a few brave souls. So how do we take that advocacy work that you're doing, and that each person that's posting, because they're all advocates, because they're all braving, putting their images out there. How do we maximize the potential of what they're doing to try and turn stuff around? What do you think would be the next steps?
Well, I think that is still in its infancy, in a lot of ways, because as you've said, it is only a couple of men, and it is, there's still some confusion about what the project is, in as much as some people think it's about looking pretty in a hospital, which, it's not. I still applaud people feeling good about themselves in those spaces, because I think that is really important. And I think if you can go into that space and you can feel good, and you can feel good about yourself and about how you are throughout your stay, and that gives you power, good. I think anything that makes you feel more powerful and better able to advocate for yourself, cool. And I don't want to take that away from anybody, and I don't want to I still think that that's valid. So, cool. I think that we can advance it with men, and break down, I guess, the idea of what traditional masculinity is, which is like no frailty. I've noticed that a lot of the men that I've seen participating in the project are queer, which makes sense to me, because there's less of an idea of like needing to assume strength at all times. Okay. Which I think is hard for men, because I think it's hard for men to say, I'm disabled, and to come out with disabilities to the world. I think it's really hard.
Yeah, I think there's this social expectation that as a man you're brought up, you're meant to be virile and strong, and the hunter-gatherer provider, and all of this kind of BS, which inside is not necessarily the case, but there's the expectation, and a lot of us try and live up to that expectation. I think it's actually probably eating people up inside. I know that.
Yeah.
That actually, when I finally sort of succumbed and had my diagnosis of dyslexia and stuff like that, I cried for quite a long time because it so suddenly everything made sense and actually understood why things were the way they were. And actually now I spend a lot of time actually being very openly dyslexic. I've come out about my neurodiversity. I believe other people should too, because it has a hidden disability and it's not a physical one. But it has effects on the way you live. It's really important that you talk about it and that people get to understand that you are different, not less.
Right, exactly. And I think that, yeah, I think that it's harder on men. I think that disability is in a lot of ways harder on men because of the ways in which women are socialized. And I think that we have to find a way for, I don't know, for men to like let go and handle their disabilities
Hey, we can't even make an
as
appointment
well.
with the doctors because we're much less prone to go to the doctors because we'll wait until a bit of us is falling off.
Uh,
That's
I mean, I can tell
no
you,
way.
I can tell you stories about having literally been dragged out of my house by my friend Mandy to go to the ER because I just didn't want to go, and I thought like, they can find my body, like I can die here. That's okay. Like maybe this is it. Maybe it's enough for me. Because you just don't want to go when you're that sick. But um, I think that we can make strides in all directions if we're around other people who are disabled and we see them and we think like this is okay. Um, so let's talk about you a little bit, Neil, and let's talk about um, your. So you are talking about your dyslexia and like operating neuroatypically in a neurotypical world. That's, I mean, that's intense. Like that's like the world around you is designed in a different way. If you have like if it mm, being around other people who experience what you do, is that a powerful thing?
Oh,
Like when you
yeah.
are around
Oh,
them?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there are, I'm a bit like a neurodiverse Pied Piper.
Similar for
Yeah, yeah,
EDS and
yeah,
other.
absolutely. So, I will collect people, and I was collected. So, so yeah, it happens. You gravitate to people that understand you, and now I spend a lot of time trying to mentor people that are neurodiverse, and a lot of them are brilliant people, like Lena, who we had on a couple of months back. She's on the autistic spectrum. She's absolutely brilliant, great mind, really sharp. But we do see things differently. I spent a lot of time as a child thinking, but people are different. I feel different. I don't know how I explain that. I couldn't really understand at that point what it was. I just felt something, and it was only later on when I actually went to work for a company that was specializing in that topic, in dyslexia and so on, that actually it's like, well, this is so close to home, I better just go and get myself tested and admit to it. Even though a close friend of mine had been telling me for years, come on, man, you're dyslexic. No, I'm not. I've done all these things. I'm not. I've got coping strategies. Honestly, want to conform. Actually, now I'm happy not conforming because
Yeah.
because actually, you know what, I'm much more comfortable in my own skin by not having to conform. And I know that this is something we've chatted about online, and it's like when I mention conformity, I can feel your hackles rising, and so I'm really happy to be a fellow nonconformist. So tell us about your bright yellow hair and how that came about as well, because we were talking about conformity and everything.
Oh yeah. So around when I started going to the doctors a lot more often, I was being diagnosed with a brain tumor, which is not something that I talk about that much on the internet for a couple of reasons. One of them is that it was very difficult for me to access in-person support at the time. I experienced just some problems with my family, and I had I had one of my best friends who was also a sick person just ditched me, just flat out ditched me. So that was kind of heartbreaking. And so I decided not to talk about it that openly because um, whenever I'm able to get rid of this thing, I'm still going to be sick. I'm still going to have Ehlers-Danlos
Yeah.
syndrome, and I'm always going to be sick, and that's always going to get worse. So I don't have a traditional like, oh, there's a tumor. Oh, um, let's get her better drive. Like, there's none of that like hopefulness. There's none of that arc. So it's been a little bit difficult to handle in that respect. But around that time, I decided, you know what, let me just dye my hair blonde because it was something that I always wanted to do. I've been a redhead since childhood. And so I dyed it platinum blonde, and it's been like shades of platinum blonde with some neon yellow in there. Sometimes I dump in different colors because I figured that it would fall out, and so it didn't matter if it was unhealthy. And also that I was beginning this project that was based in media, and I wanted to give it the best possible footing. So I thought that being blonde was a decidedly political decision
Okay.
because blonde women are more highly regarded socially and culturally. Um, and for whatever reason, and I thought that conforming as closely to a conventional standard of beauty would actually help push disabilities closer to the center of a narrative, which I don't know. I mean, the pictures did get some attention, so
Oh, yeah. And
that's so that's
so
it
it worked.
worked in that regard. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if they would have. I mean, maybe it would have done the same as a redhead, but it doesn't. You know, who knows? And
Okay.
now I'm blonde.
When it's in black and white, obviously you've got the color contrast as well. So I know
Right.
when you're taking the moody shots, yeah, it works well. I think we're closing towards the end of our half hour, so it's gone really quick, and it's been brilliant. I'm really looking forward to our Twitter chat tomorrow.
Oh, but even so, for anybody who's listening, though, even if you have the opportunity to go to an in-person support group, even if you think it's going to be horrible or if you think that you're not going to get along with anyone, just do it because time moves forward and you really have no idea what's going to happen or whether or not it's going to be horrible. And then there are going to be chances for other ones. So just do it. Just start meeting other people in person because you will learn other things from physically being in the room with other people, whether it's the way that someone glances at a clock or the way that they hold their hands or something else. You will learn something. It doesn't have to be about gaining emotional support. Just look at it as a learning endeavor and you will get something out of it regardless.
Yeah.
And then that's a good first step.
Yeah, no, I agree. I personally have support groups and they're informal, but my father, who's also got Parkinson's and a brain tumor, goes to a support group, and actually it's made a huge difference. Not so much in terms of the support, but actually he's going out and doing stuff with a new group of friends as well. And I think that's something that's really important to that shouldn't be discounted. So once again, thank you very much, Karolyn. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Karolyn. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you.